I'd like to welcome everybody to this evening's webinar, our PST primer, our Progressive Skills Training Primer. As a primer, what we're going to be doing today is basically covering the basics, talking about the concepts, introducing you to the language, and basically giving you an overview as to what we refer to when we say progressive skills training, and try to answer some key questions about what it is and the impact of activity-specific coordination on how we can approach training to improve athlete performance more quickly, more effectively, and reduce the risk of injury. So we won't spend too much time or go into too much detail in any one aspect. I think once you start to see what we're going to talk about, your first reaction will be to want more information about specific exercises for specific sports. We're not going to get into that today. We're just going to cover the basics and explain the background and really the power of what we're referring to with respect to progressive skills training. In future webinars, though, starting right away this fall and throughout the winter, we'll be doing a bunch of stuff on different protocols and different areas of progressive skills training for different sports, where we're going to get into a lot of detail, show the results of research, show the results of case studies, and really get into sort of the detail and the kind of stuff that you're going to be most excited about and really sink your teeth in. So again, as a primer tonight, we're just going to cover the basics. I do want to remind everybody that these webinars are recorded, and as soon as we can, we'll get them posted. We'll get them out at our website, xenolink.com. We'll also get them out on our YouTube site, on the blog, and various different locations, so that you can view these at a later date as a reference and have access to them. So with that, we'll go ahead and we'll get started. Today, let's back up. Today, what we're essentially going to be talking about is effectively applying the science of biomechanics and physiology to athlete training and coaching. I think that's key. The big key here is effectively applying. If you were able to join our Xenolink primer yesterday, we talked about our primary focus as a company, and our primary focus with respect to our technology is to provide practical, useful information that has direct impact on improving performance and reducing the risk of injury quickly and with greater magnitude than what we currently see. So our main focus is being effective. We're not trying to make measurements for the sake of measurement or to be creative about what we're measuring. We're trying to get right down to what's important and find ways to apply that information effectively. I think there's no better example than what we've developed over the course of looking at data and trying to find ways to better help athletes as the idea of progressive skills training. It's sort of the culmination of looking at the data and trying to find ways to help athletes improve and gain an edge and reduce the risk of mechanical injury. So again, effectively applying the science of biomechanics and physiology to athlete training and coaching. So traditionally, what's thought of in terms of athlete training, for the most part, is strength, speed, and mobility. It used to be, not that long ago, get in the gym, pump some iron kind of concepts. Now, obviously, there's all kinds of quote-unquote functional training. It's all fantastic, and it should be a part of any athlete's repertoire, whether it be an amateur athlete or obviously a professional athlete. But what's missing is this idea of activity-specific coordination. So traditionally, we've thought of strength, speed, and mobility, but we've not given much thought to activity-specific coordination. Activity-specific coordination is really the key. It's the key to what separates elite athletes from sub-elite athletes, and even at the elite level, the super elite from the rest of the pack. So the idea now that we want you to start to focus on is activity-specific coordination. Part of the reason it hasn't been focused on is because the ability to measure, quantify, and understand activity-specific coordination hasn't been there. The idea about understanding functional movement has been a growing trend over the last 5 to 10 years, the functional movement screens, finding these ways to try to use analogous measurements to understand how the body might actually perform an activity. With the dawn of 3D motion, 3D motion data and quantifying movement, we can now actually measure function during the activity, and that's where this idea of activity-specific coordination comes in. So, what is activity-specific coordination? I think one of the best examples I can use is the example of Charles Barkley. As a basketball player, Charles Barkley was a phenomenal athlete, a very skilled, very athletic individual who played at a very elite level. When you look at Charles Barkley as a golfer, and we all know this because it's been publicized through the Haney Project and all kinds of different things, when you see Charles as a golfer, you don't see that athleticism, but it doesn't disappear. Charles is every bit as athletic, every bit as strong, every bit as functional, explosive as he was as a basketball player. But yet he doesn't have the same success swinging the golf club that he did playing basketball. And that's because there are specific patterns of movement, biomechanical function, if you will, that make an effective golf swing. And if you watch the Haney Project as a good example of watching, Charles go through this process of trying to learn golf swing, that focused primarily on technique. And it was virtually impossible to really change technique because the core movement patterns were never addressed. So there's some very basic core movement patterns that if at the core or sort of at the engine of driving this process, technique becomes almost second nature, and technique becomes easier to teach if the body moves in a more efficient patterns. So activity-specific coordination really boils down to each athletic endeavor, whether it be shooting a basketball, swinging a golf club, throwing a baseball, serving a tennis ball, each athletic activity, unique activity, requires a very unique, specific set of functional movement patterns or biomechanical patterns. And those need to be trained and addressed in order to see dramatic improvement in athletic performance. And that improvement will reduce the risk of injury through more efficient, effective movement. So developing developing activity-specific coordination necessitates specificity in training. And if you go look up specificity on National Strength and Conditioning Association's website or whatever, specificity is becoming more and more important. What we're looking at is taking specificity really to the next level with what we call progressive skills training. So again, to reiterate, developing activity-specific coordination, which is really the key to performance, athletic performance, necessitates specificity in training, and that's a key. Progressive skills training is really, if you think of what we've tried to develop here, and it's just the tip of the iceberg, but progressive skills training is essentially exercise in the shape of a specific sport activity. And you can put in for specific sport activity, kicking a soccer ball, throwing a baseball, hitting a golf ball, serving a tennis ball, whatever it might be. Exercise in the shape of the specific sport activity, taking specificity to the next level. And that's essentially what we're referring to when we're talking about progressive skills training. Let me give you a couple examples here. And I did this just within the last few days as I started to put together my thoughts on this presentation and take the presentation really to the next level. If you just go out and Google, golf balance or golf course stability or, whatever it might be, you'll come up with a plethora of functional, quote-unquote, exercises for golf. And they're all very good, and they're all very effective in their own right. But what they don't address is the golf swing itself. And I'm going to use golf as an example, but this is true. Just insert whatever sport you're interested in, running, football, baseball, whatever, soccer. They don't address the basic movement. And I'm going to get into this, again, not in too much detail, but first off, it's understanding what the basic movement really is first, and then developing the exercise around that. Let me talk first about balance. Balance, and as I say this, I'm going to try to draw, contrast. I'm not everything in moderation, and all these things are important, but I'm going to try to draw some contrast here as I discuss, your standard strength and conditioning or functional training versus what we're doing with PST. First, understand what balance is in the golf swing. Functional balance in the golf swing has nothing to do with standing upright and balancing on your toes or balancing with your eyes closed or whatever. What functional balance boils down to in the golf swing is your ability to use the ground and the ground reaction to your force applied, ground reaction force, to create torque in a very specific pattern, which allows you to initiate the power process. That's balance in the golf swing. What happens in the golf swing, and I want to say virtually everybody, but in 75% of the, or probably 90% of the average golfer out there, even the elite level golfer out there, as they take the club back during the backswing, they push their weight to their heel to the outside of their foot. They don't maintain a good platform. They don't interact with the ground very effectively. They lose their connection to the ground. They don't stay in the ball of their foot. Their foot rolls to the outside, weight rolls to the outside to the heel. Immediately they're out of balance. Have they fallen down? No. Are they still basically functional? Yeah. Are they able to very quickly push against the ground and create torque? No, they are not. And so that is balance. So if you look at the functional approach, and this happens to be some stuff from Titleist, which is all really good. But if you look at this, I know plenty of people who can do this, and I know plenty of people who can do all kinds of fun stuff on a wobble board. I mean, take it to extremes. You have people who can, kneel on Swiss balls and do all kinds of crazy stuff. I know plenty of people who can do that. They can't play a lick of golf. And I know plenty of people that couldn't come close to doing this stuff who play phenomenal golf, the highest level of golf. So does that mean that we don't want to be functionally fit? We don't want to be strong and mobile, and no, absolutely not. The more effectively functional we are, strength, mobility, power, obviously the better off we are. But what's key to improving the golf swing is shaping it into a pattern that's effective for producing golf swing performance. So do this a ton. Do all the things it takes to build some strength and balance, but then shape it into the golf swing. So I just want to show you here real quick. Obviously we've seen kind of stuff like this. One-legged golf posture poses, wobble board stuff. Great. That's all fantastic. What we would suggest from a PST perspective is, and again, this is just a sampling of stuff, but first we use a simple press forward exercise to show people how to stay in the ball of their foot and push weight from ball of foot to ball of foot. Absolutely critical. You could be able to do this blindfolded, one leg with your hand tied behind your back. If you can't push weight from ball of foot to ball of foot, you're lost in the golf swing. So we need to teach the body and train the body how to do something that's very specific to golf swing performance. We also need to be able to, as we push weight from ball of foot to ball of foot and stay within a base, as we create torque, we need to be able to create torque. So here's an exercise that's typically looked at as some sort of backswing separation exercise. It's really a lower body balance exercise where we use a Swiss ball to force the foot into solid contact to the ground. We look at isolating the lower body, creating a resistance at the lower body, or a counter torque, let's say, at the lower body, as we rotate the upper body this direction. This is not a core separation exercise as much as it is learning how to create the appropriate torque patterns. So we combine weight shift with torque, and now we're getting somewhere. So now we're teaching the body in an exercise scenario how to create a pattern that's going to provide an effective power base for the golf swing. Okay? So not that this isn't important, but this won't mean a lick unless you can do this. And if you can't do this, you cannot perform the golf swing effectively. You'll be compensating right off the word go. So what we're looking at from a progressive skills training perspective is let's teach coordination in the shape of exercise that essentially mimics the activity itself. In this case, we're talking about golf, but again, insert the sport you're interested in. Let's look at another very effective one. The functional train. There's so many versions of chops and lifts, and they're fantastic exercises. Here I have, I've just, again, Googled golf core and came up with about 1,000 images and exercises that were related to chop and lift. And they're all fantastic exercises. Some are kneeling on both knees, some are one knee, some are standing, you name it, they're all over the map. And they're fantastic exercises. But how many times in the golf swing do you do that? Are you attached to a cable moving slowly on one knee? Right? So yes, use this exercise, that's great. But here's an exercise that mimics a chop and lift type of pattern, but does it in a golf swing scenario, employing in this case, multiple characteristics. And what's beautiful about this is it allows us to swing a club, or in this case, a flyout stick, at speed, where we can actually move it at speeds that are virtually identical to the speeds that we're going to be encountering in the golf swing. And with this, in this case, we can even employ some plyometrics, and we can also employ some overweighted, underweighted. So we can do everything now at golf speeds and under golf scenario. So what we do here is we isolate the lower body with the Swiss ball. And again, this is just a version. I'm going to talk about progressions and how we go from here. But again, what we do is, okay, let's emphasize lower body mechanics. Let's emphasize torque and staying within our ball of foot to ball of foot base and all the good things that we know about good lower body. If you do that, you're going to maintain good core stability, because core stability is 90% coordination, and of that, 75% is probably lower body mechanics alone. So we're teaching the lower body to do its thing. We're also teaching the core, the spine, to stabilize in an orientation that's going to create a good swing plane. And then what we do is we take the club shaft back on a diagonal with the right hand, if you're a right-handed golfer, with the right hand laying on the shaft, not gripping, but laying on the shaft. And then we fire the arm forward in a diagonal pattern across into an impact bag at speed. Now we can do it slower to begin with, then we can ramp up the speed. Like I said, we can add weight, take some weight off the plyo stick. We can do some plyometric versions of this. We can get rid of the Swiss ball. We can do it over the impact bag or eliminate the impact bag altogether. There's a million variations of this, but the key is that this trains the muscles just like an exercise, but it trains them in a very specific pattern. And the key to this thing is an exercise can look like a golf swing and have no real impact on the golf swing. We're not just trying to look like a golf swing. We're trying to mimic the biomechanical movements employed in the golf swing, and that's a key part of this. So this idea of progressive skills training boils down to the ability to use concepts from traditional strength and conditioning, concepts from technique, in terms of what patterns and planes are we trying to produce, and blends them together to impact coordination in the golf swing or in whatever the activity might be. Now, here's the key to this, and I've been hitting on this a bunch already. We must fully understand activity-specific coordination to create effective coordination exercises. And I just hit on this a number of times already. Let me reiterate it. We have to really understand what the patterns are, whether it be running, jumping, fast pitch softball, tennis serves, volleyball spikes. We have to truly understand what makes that activity up in terms of movement patterns before we can actually create an effective exercise. So understanding the movement itself is crucial. Once we understand the movement, producing exercises that actually elicit those patterns is second, and you can't just guess at that. We've spent the better part of 15 years and the last 5 years intensively studying the progressive skills training exercises to make sure that they elicit the patterns we want. We throw out everything that doesn't elicit a pattern that we're not looking for. Sometimes we're surprised and we see patterns that are effective that we weren't expecting from an exercise, but if it doesn't do something positive towards our end goal, we throw it out. As cool or as cute as the exercise is, if it's not accomplishing something, we throw it out. And we've used variations. So we use the Swiss ball, but we have tried bands and this and that. We have tried every variation of that. We found the Swiss ball to be the most effective. So again, I don't want to go into too much detail tonight on all the specifics, but really understanding the pattern that makes up the activity first is paramount to effectively creating exercises that are going to impact performance and reduce the risk of injury. So let's just go through a few things here at the end as we kind of wrap up. To truly harness the body's functional capacities for strength, mobility, and power. So you'll work out in the gym like crazy. You're on a phenomenal program, and you're just strong and physically fit, and endurance is amazing, and mobility is fantastic. You're not going to see the fruits of those labor unless you can employ that in the activity itself. So to truly harness the body's functional capacity for strength, mobility, and power, and achieve significant gains in activity-specific performance, that's the coordination. An athlete's physical ability has to be shaped into efficient and effective coordination, and that's what we've been talking about. We have to do something to shape the pattern. let's go back. Let's go back here. We have to do something to train. Sorry about that. We have to do something to train this body to be as effective at this pattern as it is at this pattern. Okay? So if we get back, so the principles of specificity of training must be applied. And simply stated, as we've kind of alluded to and said in different ways, simply stated, the closer an exercise is to producing the actual demands of the activity, the athletic endeavor, the more impact it's going to have on performance. Okay? And so that's what we're looking at. Now, again, I want to get into this a little bit, but do we eliminate strength and conditioning? Heck no. I mean, strength and conditioning is paramount. Do we eliminate coaching? Heck no. You have to have technique and understand technique to employ this effectively. So this is really the glue that bonds the two. It's the bridge that allows you to take your physical abilities and manifest them in the activity itself. Now remember, we're talking about the activity as well. We're not just talking about the sport. There's a lot that goes into the sport, playing baseball, soccer, whatever. There's so much that goes into other than just kicking a soccer ball or serving a tennis ball. But we're talking about the specific activity of kicking, throwing, hitting. So to create the highest level of specificity, we use a knowledge base of the actual biomechanics and the given athletic activity. And that's what we just discussed 2 or 3 times already now. So really create a specific training regimen that impacts coordination. We have to understand the activity on a core biomechanics level. The biomechanics of an activity will allow us to exactly define the activity-specific coordination. Again, just reiterating what we said now a number of different times and illustrated with the little examples of the exercise. Now, it's from this definition that we can create an exercise program with the highest degree of specificity. So the idea being is with progressive skills training is let's bridge that gap from the gym, quote unquote, to the field, to the playing field. Let's bridge that gap by giving the athlete the ability to harness their physical ability in the appropriate movement patterns so that the technique can be mastered. Now, ideally, the ability to quantify an individual's athlete's movement patterns will allow for the most individualized program based on the activity-specific strengths and weaknesses. So in other words, we could, based on the biomechanics, create general programs, and they would be okay. They would be pretty good. But if we know specifically within the bounds of what makes up a golf swing or what makes up a baseball pitch or what makes up a soccer kick or distance running, or whatever it might be, within those bounds, if we know specifically when an athlete does well and doesn't do well, we can create a very not only activity-specific exercise but individual-specific exercise or a program, I should say. And even if we employ the same exercises, we may want to elicit different things from them, and we'll be looking for different things out of that athlete based on their strengths and weaknesses. So before you prescribe the medication, you do the blood work to see what the levels are. You may prescribe the same medication that the guy next to you is taking, but your blood levels are different. Your body's going to react differently to the medication, so you rescreen. There's all kinds of things that make that medical model highly individual within the context of the norm, and that's what we're talking about. So again, where we start with this process to make it the most effective is a Xenolink evaluation. Using system grade freedom, optical DLT, 3D, we quantify biomechanics. Within the scope of what we know to be effective biomechanics, we're going to quantify each individual, develop a program around the individual strengths and weaknesses to get the most effective advances and performance gains out of that individual in the shortest amount of time. Rather than having Peter do Paul's exercises, let's have them do what they need and individualize this PST program. Now we're talking about PST, but this goes for virtually all kinds of exercise and all kinds of technique stuff. If we can hone that information, we can create a better overall approach to training athletes, more individualized, with greater success faster. It's amazing what you can see with athletes who are just stuck, and even advanced athletes who seem like they've reached their pinnacle and are only making inching gains. If you look at what they do well and what they don't do well, they can make gains themselves. So it's not just the lower level athletes that can make huge gains. And obviously it's all relative, but it goes beyond just the average athlete that can make the massive gains when this approach is applied. So I want to reiterate, as I've reiterated a couple different times, that progressive skill training does not replace fitness training or swing instruction or coaching at all, but instead ties the two together. So understand that progressive skills training doesn't replace, and it doesn't even really overlap. It really is the glue that binds the two together, allowing the athlete to maximize their efforts, to maximize their functional capacity, to perform at their absolute best at the given activity. So let me just kind of start to summarize here and kind of finish up. The most effective way to approach this aspect of training is in phases. So what we've looked at is somewhat behavioral and somewhat motor learning. It's also based a lot on what has been found to be effective in basic strength and conditioning, looking at phases and periodization, and sort of taking from motor learning and behavioral adaptations, neural adaptation research, as well as what we've seen in strength and conditioning to be effective, and blends those two together, because essentially, we're still employing strength and conditioning principles in most cases, but we're also looking to have impact on the nervous system and really elicit neural adaptation rather than muscle tissue or pure strength or pure mobility. So what we're looking at here is really changing movement patterns. What's amazing about this is that this can be done for certainly it works best young, starting even at 6 to 9, if you start shaping the movement pattern, teaching kids how to interact with the ground, how to brace and stabilize the core, and accelerate extremities and implements off the core from a solid base using effective ground reaction forces, patterns, and bracing techniques and things like that. You can teach that very simply to young kids in fun, kind of almost generic game type ways, and give them skill sets that then they can branch off of as they get bigger. But even a person who has been even a 75-year-old retiree who's done the same thing for most of their lives can employ this technology and this approach, progressive skills training, to make significant changes in their movement patterns very, very quickly. And in significant amounts as well, not just small gains. So let's look at this, a basic phasing type of program. What we'd be looking at here would be phase 1, where we would focus, really kind of focus on skill development and retraining movement patterns. We're most focusing on, first understanding what the athlete did well and what they didn't do well, and reshape. Is it lower body mechanics? Is it quote-unquote balance? Is it their ability to push and pull against the ground, create torque patterns? Is it their ability to then stabilize, to accelerate? Maybe the torso gets ahead of the upper body and the arms don't accelerate effectively. The club's getting released early. Let's retrain those patterns on the golf swing, or if it's baseball, maybe the athlete overstrides, lands on the heel of the foot, doesn't lead leg stabilize very effectively. And then from there is compensating, all the way up through the chain. And we really need to look at stride mechanics and the biomechanics around landing on the ball of the foot and appropriate stride length and using the lower body more effectively, lead leg stabilizing, things like that. So skill development is really our phase 1 approach. And, typically we're looking at anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks of training to start to develop pattern. Now, we're not going to perfect pattern in 4 to 8 weeks. We make as much gain as we can, and then we take that gain and we go into phase 2, where now we start to develop speed. Speed can be certainly speed, throwing, running, jumping, hitting, but we employ the same things when we work with activities like putting or distance running. So even though we're not necessarily trying to putt faster, there's aspects of controlling the body through these new movement patterns at speed and controlling range of motion and speed that are very important. And we do this again through pattern and not necessarily through just increasing muscular output. Then we have a phase 3, where once we've gone through phase 1 and a phase 2, typically maybe more in an off-season kind of program, although they can be employed in season as well, we would go into more of a phase 3 type of program, where we're really a little bit more towards in-season. And what we're doing is we're going to maintain what we gained in both development and speed. And then we're going to have some key target areas. And what we're really looking at here, and this can be practice as well as just playing, is blending these movement patterns effectively into game scenarios where they're now using their ability to move more effectively to play the game and learn how to use those patterns more effectively in the greater scope of playing and being successful at the game, which goes far beyond throwing a baseball, kicking a soccer ball, swinging a golf club. So that's our phase 3. And again, that's kind of a gross overview, but it gives you an idea of the fact that this isn't static and it's not one-dimensional, and isn't we move to perfection. These phases are we would go through these phases over the course of a year, maybe repeatedly throughout a year, with even mini cycles thrown in, and then year after year improving upon what we did last year, or the year previous, or the cycle previous, those kind of approaches. So the key is, first, obviously, understanding the movement pattern deeply, not just making measurement for the sake of measurement, for the wow factor, but understanding what makes up the movement, why is it important, and then secondly, how do we impact that movement? How do we change that movement? How do we perfect that movement or improve that movement in our athletes? And then after that, how do we take those concepts and branch them together into a program that's effective? And this is effective for your high-level athlete, your aspiring high-level athlete, but this is also very effective for your weekend warrior, your average amateur athlete who just wants to play better, be safer, avoid mechanical injury, and enjoy a sport better. I can tell you right now that as much as you might be a recreational softball player, golf or tennis, whatever it might be, that we all enjoy the game when we play better and when we're not injured. And that's key. Whether you're 6 years old or 60 years old, you're going to enjoy the game a lot more if you're more successful at it. Now, you don't have to be the best in the world at it, but being more effective at that activity and at that game is going to bring more enjoyment. And so employing these kind of things, even at the amateur weekend warrior level, is very valid and very sought after. Your average consumer wants to do things like this. They know they're going to get better. They're going to be looking to do things like this. And certainly your elite level and aspiring elite level athletes are going to be looking for something to differentiate themselves. At this point in time, it's so new that this stuff differentiates athletes. It won't be very long, especially in this day and age, before this is what everybody does, and there'll be something new to differentiate that athlete. Right now, this is a differentiating factor. Not everybody's doing this. Not everybody has access to this yet, but very soon this will be what everybody does, just like strength and conditioning, just like different aspects of coaching and technique. And then there's going to be something new to elevate athletics and athletes to the next level. So that wraps up our primer on progressive skill training. I hope that you're as excited about this stuff as I am. This is my passion. I've been doing this for 20 years. This is truly my passion, and I've never been more passionate about this in 20 years of doing this than I am about progressive skills training and the blending of quantitative biomechanics and motion measurement with some ability to apply this information to impact strength and conditioning, to impact coaching, but also provide a new avenue that bonds the two more closely together, that allows the athlete to truly benefit from their physical ability out on the playing field. I've never been more excited. You would think after doing this for 20 years, you start to get bored with it. You start to get complacent and whatnot, and I've never been more excited. So hopefully the concept excites you, and hopefully that you'll see the power in this, and you'll be intrigued. Follow up, ask questions. We're going to have more specific webinars on, the measurements and the biomechanics, and then how the protocols of PST and what we've been finding, the research that we've done, show you what patterns we elicit with these different exercises, and then protocols for blending strength and conditioning exercise into PST, and also benefiting coaching and technique from the PST as well, learning on both ends from this idea of activity-specific coordination. So hopefully you're intrigued, hopefully you're excited about it, and you'll want to find out more, and you'll join us on more webinars where we get in more detail about specific protocols in different sports. But for now, I appreciate you joining us, and hope you got something out of this. and hope to see you on a future webinar. If you're on the East Coast here, enjoy your evening. West Coast, you're just getting into your evening, and then overseas, I think, in Australia, some of our other areas, and you're just getting into your morning. So have a great day, and thanks for joining us and attending.